Next up, we got Ian Garry versus Michael Venom Page, MVP. Ian Garry, he's that dude. He's still looking for his first loss. Striker, knockout power. I'd say he's got average grappling defense. He's a guy that wants to stay standing, though. Ian Garry, to me, is a bit of a point fighter, but so is MVP. So who can point fight better? The way Michael Page made Kevin Holland look back when they fought was just, I mean, it was comical. Kevin Holland got so upset towards the end. The dude, he really stopped fighting. He just started looking around and just shaking his head and throwing his hands up in the air because he just had no answer for MVP's karate boxer. Just in and out, just come in, hit you, and get out of danger. I'm going to have to go with MVP, and we're getting MVP currently at plus 130, so we're getting him at underdog prices, 56% of the bets, 53% of the money. I don't believe in Ian Garry personally. I don't love Michael Venom Page either, but just from what we saw out of MVP versus Kevin Holland, which Kevin Holland just had an impressive win here not too long ago, I think that MVP showed enough for me to take him to win a decision over Ian Garry, but I don't even have to pick a method since I can get him at the plus 130. What do you think, Bobby?
This fight is the most difficult one for me to kind of think about in terms of deciding how this fight's going to play out and who might potentially win this fight because there's just so much to go over with this. So I don't like either guy. If you've been watching this show, following me on Twitter, if you're a Bullshito Bobby guy out there or a girl, you know, I love all my fans, no matter what gender you are, and I appreciate you for being part of the team. You know that I absolutely despise both of these individuals. I am no fan of Ian Garry. I am definitely no fan of Michael Venom Page. For the longest time, I hated Michael Page way more than I hated Ian Garry. Now the line's moved a lot closer, and I'm pretty equal with my criticism of both. Michael Page for him being the worst aspect of combat sports, which is being fed cans for highlight reel knockouts, and Ian Garry for basically being like this fight's at welterweight, I believe. Kind of being like a welterweight Sean Strickland is the word I'm looking for here. So, yeah, that's my problem with both of those guys. Ian Garry talks a lot. I have not necessarily seen him back it up yet. He talks about ending people. He talks about, changing their bum lives and all this Conor McGregor stuff, which I don't mind. Conor McGregor is a good fighter to emulate in terms of promoting yourself, but it's kind of funny that you say you're going to end somebody and knock them out, and you go out there and pull the Sean Strickland and you scream at them as you're backing up and half-heartedly jabbing. So here's my analysis for this fight. People think this is going to be an exciting fight, and hey, I just had some props. Nice.
Hey.
So people think this is going to be an exciting fight. I'm sorry. I really don't think it is, and here's the main reason why I don't think Ian Garry and Michael Page is going to be an exciting fight. These two, pretty much their main weaknesses are the same. Anytime you have fighters who have the same weaknesses and you're relying on them to fight each other and to try to do what they're worst at and implement that as a focal point of their game plan, that's going to just be a recipe for disaster. And what I'm talking about is this. Ian Garry is not really good at the clinch. He thinks he is. He uses the clinch a lot, but he's not as good as he thinks he is in the clinch. Michael Page sucks in the clinch. He sucks in the grappling department. Ian Garry, not that great in the grappling department. I haven't seen enough of his grappling to feel confident in it. He's primarily a striker. So to rely on Michael Page to take down Ian Garry or Ian Garry to take down Michael Page is just a recipe for disaster if that's how they're going to try to approach this fight. Anytime you're trying to capitalize on what you're worst at and make it a huge part of your game plan, I feel like you're setting yourself up for failure. And here's some other issues. Ian Garry has a really huge issue with every fight in the UFC so far. He gets backed up to the fence multiple times. He really needs to work on his awareness of the cage because before you know it, he's completely flat with his back up against it. And that is kind of where Michael Page has made a career, is pushing cans like up against the fence and doing like a flying knee or doing like a flashy spinning kick, like a taekwondo karate flashy kick, like those type of things. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, that's how he cracked Evangelista Santos's skull. Was he backed Santos up against the cage? Santos shot like a really sloppy takedown with no setup and just got completely flatlined by a flying knee, courtesy of Michael Venom Page. So Garry just constantly gets backed up to the fence. That's just so concerning. He's going to want to strike with MVP, even though Michael Page has unfortunately wasted the majority of his career fighting inferior competition. I'm like you. I was very pleased to see what he was able to do against his first real step up in comp, which was Kevin Holland. And that leads me to another thing here about this fight. So we know the first Douglas Lima fight was the first loss that MVP ever experienced, and that basically came courtesy of a calf kick that buckled MVP. He got put on his butt, and then once he got up, Lima basically just like hammer of Thor punch was able to just like flatline MVP as he tried to get up from having his calf swept from the calf kick. So since then, people still think that the calf kick is an effective strategy to utilize against MVP. I can't disagree with that too much, but here's some issues with that. Douglas Lima in the rematch, MVP managed to win the rematch split decision. He was able to overcome that mental block, I guess you could call it, of being finished in essence by a calf kick that led to the finish. He was able to overcome that and move on. Lost the fight after that, but that was a split decision. Those are his only two losses. Getting to the Kevin Holland fight, it was interesting as I rewatched that fight this weekend to see Kevin Holland try to utilize the calf kick, but for whatever reason abandon it. To try to grapple and be in such advantageous positions against MVP, at one point almost having a rear naked choke sunk in, and then abandon it. So my biggest complaint and my biggest head scratcher is I feel like in that Kevin Holland fight, there's a little part of me that thinks that Kevin Holland lost because he gave up, because he lost the fight. It was his fight to lose. He was doing the right things. He was calf kicking, just abandoned it for no reason. Had grappling exchanges. If you ever find yourself in a position to have a rear naked choke, Nick Diaz told this to Nate Diaz, which led to him doing the double birds and his triangle finish over the guy who I'm forgetting right now, unfortunately. But you know what I'm talking about. And what I'm getting at with this is he told Nate, anytime you have a choke sunk in, you need to be able to do something like throw up the double birds to the camera because you know they're not getting out of that. And that's how a rear naked choke that you have against MVP should be when you're clearly the superior grappler. If you have that in, that needs to be a tap. That can't be him rolling out and reversing position and getting back to his feet like it was. So that's kind of my X factor is how much of that was Kevin Holland just like, I don't know, was he just getting frustrated? Like you said, was the taunting getting to him? Was like the mental thing a factor? What made him start off with a solid game plan and then just abandon it? Because I feel like for all my criticism of his antics, of his dancing around, of his little robot dance moves and, stutter stepping and all that, apparently it does get in guys' heads. Apparently it does piss them off. And another X factor is Ian Machado Garry, no matter how much he might think of himself as a mentally tough individual, is the guy who shut down his Twitter for a long time because of jokes about his wife. Like, clearly things get to him. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. So this is just a really interesting fight because I don't think the grappling is going to be at play, which is what makes me once again think it's going to be boring. It's just going to be, I don't need to talk anymore about karate boxing. I just spent a lot of the early half of the show talking about it, but that's what MVP has, that style. And Garry is a very safe guy also who likes to throw a left high kick, which has a opportunity to knock you out, or maybe it's a right high kick, but you know the one I'm talking about since he's an orthodox fighter. That has the potential, but other than that, like his most recent fight with Jeff Neal that I watched, very lackluster against a shot Jeff Neal that's no longer the guy he used to be. So what I'm getting at for my prediction is this. I don't think it's going to be exciting. I'll be honest. I think it's going to be boring. I think it's going to be very dirty. I think it's going to be a lot of clinching by both guys, thinking they have the advantage there, primarily by Ian Garry to try to take away the striking prowess and the striking advantage that I feel like Page does have. And I just think it's just going to be really disgusting, honestly. And I also think Ian Garry, is getting a hype train. People like to act like he's this victim because of all the jokes about his wife and all that. But, he is getting a hype train, and I think this is kind of funny because Michael Page is the guy who's supposed to have the hype train right now that everybody should be really high on. And for him to be at a plus 130, I'm kind of baffled. I think this should be way closer to a pick-em. Ian Garry just isn't showing me much to work with here, and I'm going to go with Michael Page. I really want to take a decision for either guy because Page by decision right now is plus 250. Garry by decision's plus 150. But I'm going to try to be safe, and I'm just going to say I'm going to take Michael Page money line at plus 130 right now. That's huge value. And I'm going to say this goes – oh, yeah, they're kind of expecting it. They think it's going to be over 2.5 because they got it set at minus 210. It's dicey at 2.5 because obviously this is a 3-round fight, I do believe, so you're not going to have much time left after that. But I don't see either guy getting a flash knockout. I just think it's going to be too safe and too boring of a fight to result in a flash knockout. The only time Michael Page was even knocked out was, like I said, the result of some calf kicks, which buckled him. He got caught coming up because he didn't defend himself. Gary's undefeated. Yeah, I'm taking the over, and I'm taking Page money line.
Better start listening to the Better in Green podcast. You will not regret it. Trust me, trust me, trust me. And hey, I'm Dean Blandino.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to Better in Green, eh? To Better in Green, eh? To Better in Green, eh? Listen in and cash out. That's what it's all about. Come on, let's make cash now. We always on spot and we cover old spot from the bottom to the top, hey. Shout out to Ethan, shout out to Wyatt, shout out to Ben. Welcome, welcome to our podcast, Better in Green.